Sue sat on the sofa and waited for Rob to get home. Rosemary was curled up asleep on her lap. Sue had taken her in to see the vet earlier that day to have her first set of 3 booster shots. It was the same vet she had gone to with Rob and Max. He seemed competent. Rosemary had passed her physical and her tests with flying colors. She was completely healthy. Sue had her for 1 week, and the pamphlet she had gotten with her suggested that she be taken to a veterinarian within that first week. Rosemary cried out from her cardboard carrier the whole way there and back, and it was almost a half an hour each way. She did not like being in the car. Sue drove with one hand on the wheel, while the other one had fingers poked through the air holes for Rosemary to sniff and lick and bite and scratch at. It helped keep her calm. Sue talked to her the entire time, not caring if the people next to her at the red lights thought she was a lunatic, since they couldn't see Rosemary's carrier on the passenger seat. Sue would have to take her back to the vet's in 2 more weeks to have her stitches taken out. Then a week after that she would have to go in again to have her second booster. After the 3rd booster, a few weeks after that, she wouldn't need to go back for a whole year. Sue couldn't wait for that break period. She was not looking forward to the next 3 vet visits that would come in the next month or so. Also, she had to feed her antibiotics through a syringe twice a day for the next 7 days. It would be hell, but it would be worth it to keep Rosemary healthy. Sue felt so bad for her, though. She was only 2 months old, and she had already been spayed and poked and prodded, and there was so much more to come. It seemed like such a shitty way to start life. Sue noticed that Rosemary's nails were even clipped flat. The Humane Society hadn't let her alone for a minute. She hoped they squeezed some playtime in there, but figured not. It wasn't practical. Sue would make it up to her for the rest of her little life, which she hoped would not run such a little course, by spoiling her rotten. She was already getting a good head start on it. There was more food than Rosemary could possibly eat, and she could eat a lot, and there was more playtime than she could stay awake for. She even seemed to enjoy sleepy time as quality time. Sue was having a blast having her around. She reminded herself that she needed to thank Rob, really thank him. Helping to get him the job at the diner didn't feel like much of a thank you. He would have to bust his own ass and prove himself as a good worker, and use a chunk of that money to help her pay the rent. She was also looking forward to having some shifts together with him. They wouldn't get to interact much, but it would just be nice to see him now and then. She missed having a friend at work. He had done some ridiculous things for someone who was about to go on a job interview. The shaved head was one thing, but the eyebrows too. That was a bit too much. He had giggled to her as he thought about telling Mike that he had just gone through chemotherapy. He had thought that maybe the pity points would help him get the job. She had informed him that maybe they would not want to hire someone who could be too sick to work. He realized that was a good point. She told him to say he had alopecia instead. He asked her what that was, and she told him it was a condition that could make you lose all your head and body hair. It didn't make you sick, and it wasn't contagious. He said that was perfect. She told him he didn't really need to explain his physical appearance, but he insisted that it be addressed. He wanted to beat Mike to the punch before he could come to any reservations or judgments about the way he looked. Rob told her that looks are important to an employer when they are dealing with the public, even if he would be tucked away in the kitchen. She told him he could just say he's a swimmer and needed to be more hydrodynamic. He said he liked the alopecia thing. It would be a funny private joke between them. He told her that he was probably just a nut, but he actually liked the look and the feel, and he may keep it for some time. The two of them had resisted snickering when Rob pretended to be embarrassed and told Mike about his follicle-reducing impairment. She had gone along with the joke happily. It was fun to have yet another one over on Mike. Still, she needed a proper thank you for Rob making Rosemary come into her life. He had finished moving in a few days earlier. They had been able to fit everything into her car and only had to make a few trips. He said he had no need for his old love seat or his bed. He said he preferred Michelle's bed. Sue was relieved that he didn't want to strap it to the top of her little vehicle and cram it into the apartment. They agreed that Michelle's bed was then his, and if he ever wanted to move out, he could take it with him. He said he would probably be there for as long as she would have him. That didn't feel like much of a thank you for him. It didn't cost her a thing, and it had saved her some headache with the moving. He'd gone through some really heavy shit. He was dealing with it in his own way as best as he could, and if shaving off all his hair helped him get to an okay headspace, then she would be supportive. He needed more than just support, however. He needed to feel wanted and appreciated. She couldn't imagine the levels of guilt he had over what had happened. She knew she would have them if the situation were reversed back on her, and those feelings couldn't be shrugged off, no matter how much someone else told him it was not his fault. She felt that she was a pretty good person to say it, though. She had not let him pay the $400 pet deposit, even though he had almost thrown a tantrum about it. She told him that the $500 he had left had more than covered that. He said that was for borrowing the car, and that it was to help with cab fare. She told him that they had taken the bus while he was gone, and that she couldn't sell the car for that much. He reluctantly backed down. That was hardly any kind of a thank you at all. She would make it up to him, though. She would show him how much she really did want him around and how appreciated he was. She would somehow make everything up to him later. He had moved in with all of his horror movie collection. She had let it slip that she had not seen all of George Romero's Dead films, and he had chastised her harshly. She had already seen Night. It came on television every Halloween. She watched Dawn earlier that night. She had seen it once before, but hadn't really remembered it. It took her a while to get into its campy rhythm. Then she watched Day. She liked that one much more after everyone stopped screaming at each other about halfway through. Rob was right. The gore was impressive. Even though she was enjoying herself with the zombies, she needed a little break. She loved horror, but she was not as much of a zealot about it as Rob was. She had played the string game with Rosemary and thrown her little toy balls to her while the movies had played. She paid attention to the films, though. She knew Rob would grill her about them later and practically make her take an oral exam. It was cute, though, but so was Rosemary. She was still sleeping on Sue's lap. Sue did not want to get up and disturb her. She looked so precious, and it made Sue feel wanted and appreciated. She told herself that she would not get a pet for Rob as an answer. There would be another solution. He was more of a dog person, and she did not want Rosemary to have to put up with some hyper mutt. She would find another way. She felt she was stuck where she was on the sofa, so she just reached over and grabbed the remote. She turned it from the DVD screen and back to the television channels. She looked at the time. It was almost 2. Rob would have to be done with work soon. The diner would be closed by then. She had expected him a couple hours back since he was supposed to start pretty much right after she had left him there. That meant either Mike had him wait to start or was working him overtime. Mike never let anyone get overtime. Rob had insisted on taking the bus back. She swore that was silly since she had the car, but he said he might want an alone ride home to rid himself of the day in case it went bad before seeing her again. If he had a crappy day, he would have it completely out of his system by the time the bus got him home. She had understood and agreed, but told him to call if he changed his mind. He had not called. There was never anything good on at that time of night. That was fine. She didn't really want to pay attention to anything. She had been focused for hours on the living dead and the underlying social implications that was the subtext in the films. Rob had told her to watch for that. She wanted some mindless TV. The fat-burning infomercial that was on was a bit too mindless. She channel surfed up and down a few numbers. She stopped when she got to a rebroadcast of the nightly news that had been live just a few hours earlier. The little girl's drawing of the demon was on the screen. It was colored in. She gasped and quickly thumbed up the volume. Rosemary was woken up in Sue's agitated lap. "Sorry, baby," Sue said to her while never taking her eyes off the set. She absently rubbed her to calm her. The lead, gray-haired anchorman was alone at the desk. The drawing was put in a little box by his head while he continued talking. "Still focusing on all the strange aspects of this case," the anchorman was saying with a stern face. "The demonic killer, as he is being called now, was only the beginning to this horrific story. The murderous rampage he went on seemed to be unstoppable. How he evaded authorities for so long and did what he did to so many people remains unexplained. He is also suspected in connection with numerous disappearances as well. The nightmare seemed to have ended at last when the body, which was identified as being that of the killer by surviving witnesses, was discovered in California's petrified forest. A new set of questions arose upon finding the body, but no one could have imagined that the gruesome scenario was not over at all. The picture of the fantastic Cosianth demon. Can we show the picture again?" The drawing dominated the screen once more. "This was attached to the body when it was found. On the back is the note. I will read it again." The note was typed up on screen. The anchorman read it aloud while it was shown. "This strange message seems to want to get the word out to a killer demonic bloodline that their reign of terror is about to come to an end by the hands of a monster. Can we show the picture again?" It reappeared in the box by the man's head. "Thank you. There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the fantastic creature that is supposed to be related to the demonic killer and is supposedly killing off its lineage because of their apparent murderous impulses and abilities. The note is warning those individuals to stay in the light at night and to not be alone. We here at the station do not know if this is some sort of code or message to the other killers. The note says they are smart and not to be tricked and to get the word out. We are doing just that despite rumors that this may be a message intended for multiple killers out there. That may explain why the events have been happening all over the country and within a time frame and distance that makes it downright impossible for one person to have accomplished it all alone. This note was first believed to be the stuff of tabloid exploitation, but it seems to have a more sinister purpose after all. There appears to be either a copycat killer or a continuation from the accomplice or accomplices that have been working in tandem with the demonic killer all along. The first reported slaying since the killer's demise has happened right here in Los Angeles. It is the typical modus operandi. The skull of the 26-year-old Hispanic male victim was crushed, and parts of the body were bitten out and believed to be ingested. The chewed-out sections were not found at the crime scene. There was more flesh removed from this body than from any before in this fashion. It happened in the neighborhood known as Little Armenia, and residents there are urged to be careful and remain watchful. Police are considering a curfew for the area, although the killings usually have not stayed in the same area. There are no witnesses of this murder at this time. The anchorman turned from the side and looked straight out of the camera in front of him. The little box by his head disappeared. He continued, "Just when it seemed as things surrounding this case couldn't get any more bizarre, we have word that the killer's body has disappeared or was stolen from the county morgue in the city of Calistoga. There are rumored reports of an autopsy being impossible to perform due to an inability to cut a Y incision into the killer's skin. This remains a speculation only, as the coroner's office and local police have no comment on the autopsy. The report on that is still unavailable at this time. The cause of death is still officially being stated as a stab wound through the eye. The facility was heavily staffed and guarded, and there is no evidence of anyone breaking in and stealing the killer's corpse. The location of the body still remains a mystery." The station went to a commercial for Sprite. "Oh my God," Sue said aloud. Rosemary was still on her lap, looking up at her. "Scoot, sweetie," Sue said to her as she gently set her on the sofa cushion beside her. Sue got up and began pacing the living room. Rosemary paced with her, flicking her tail with each turn. Sue went to the phone and called the diner. No one answered. It was after 2:30 and everyone should have left by then. Sue slammed the phone down. "Where the fuck are you?" she pleaded as she paced. She looked desperately around the apartment as if some sort of an answer would come from the room. She thought about getting in her car and going along the bus route to try to catch him or his bus. She had to tell him. It could not wait. "Fuck me," she said, as she realized that she should have popped a tape into the VCR. It was right there, underneath the DVD player, with a tape sticking out of it, like a tongue that was mocking her. She wished she had just taped right over whatever the hell was on it. She told herself not to worry. It was big news and was sure to be on the next day as well. She continued pacing for hours. She had completely given up on the idea of driving around looking for him. She would just miss him. That was how those things always went. She began to worry about him, really worry. What if the killer was not really dead and had gone after Rob again? She was beginning to feel real panic. Just after 5 o'clock in the morning, as the sun was starting to show its first rays of the day, Rob came through the door. Sue had turned off the television and was waiting for him on the sofa. The apartment was quiet. Rosemary had curled up and gone back to sleep on Sue's lap, but she lifted her head when the front door had opened and closed. Rob had closed the door, but had not turned back around after watching it shut. He took a deep breath. Sue watched his shoulders rise up and fall from the breath, and then the back of his head fell forward. He had been home and in the room for only a matter of seconds when she finally spoke up. He jumped at the sound of her voice and turned around. "Where the hell have you been?" she asked him with alarm.